that the things that are essential and important to get done are impossible. It turns out that for anything anyone has ever done, anyone has ever set their mind to, someone else has come along, some nihilist or cynic, and said, well, that's impossible. You know what this is like. You've faced it your whole life probably too, as I have. Okay, so you might say, well, what about an 8-hour day at the beginning of the last century? And someone says, well, that's impossible and will kill you if you even try. Safer working conditions? Impossible. More time with our families? Impossible. How about a weekend? Impossible. How about inventing cheese? Impossible. Like, the answer is always like, oh, that's impossible. You know, like for the people that don't spend their time imagining a better world, everything seems to be impossible. All right, so even language itself was considered impossible at some point, and I like to imagine it this way. Like, at some point, there was some monkey, and for sure this was a woman, you just know it. Like, she's sitting around the campfire with these other monkeys, and she's like, guys, you know, no, like about walking. She's like, guys, the other day, I jumped out of this tree, and I kind of went for a while on 2 legs. The other monkeys are no, that's impossible. If you even do that again, we'll kill you. And she's like, no, really, I think I can get on 2 legs. And they're like, no, kill her, that's impossible. You know, that's like the thing I want to point out about whether it's the 8-hour day or walking, everything that somebody has said is impossible has turned out to be absolutely freaking possible. The wheel began by being impossible, you just know it. Writing, singing, dancing were impossible to somebody, and yet we did it. Anything that is actually important to do and needs to get done in somebody's head is impossible. And I'm talking about sanity versus insanity, because sanity keeps trying to happen. Somebody keeps saying that's impossible. Yeah, making the world a better place, usurping the madness of our political gridlock, making the streets safer, gaining financial ground, becoming a sustainable culture, making friends of other nations rather than so often creating enemies, breathing cleaner air into our bodies, saving other species that help comprise the rest of the tree of life. That's all supposed to be impossible? What's impossible to me is almost everything that we have been putting up with that is actually absolutely wrong and nuts. Like political corruption, inept and false leaders who lead us into attacking other countries to no good purpose at the cost of thousands or millions of broken and lost lives. That's impossible to me. Avarice and exploitation as a national standard for business. Cutting education budgets while we can't even question military excess. That's impossible. Disingenuous and misleading political parties. That we should imbibe the idea that people should work and work their lives away, watch their economic buying power erode, only work for the sake of someone else's vision at the cost of time with our families and kids. That's impossible to challenge. We continue to put up with that. I call it totally possible. The idea and practice that the world simply exists to be bought and sold by the pound as if the world under our very feet is not in truth sacred, as if it is not our very home. The idea that we ourselves are powerless in the very communities where we live, watching cars speeding through our neighborhoods, powerless to even come out and put in a speed bump without needing to ask permission. That's impossible. From so many directions, for whatever reason, we are told that what we need to do to make the world a more sane place to live is somehow, again, impossible. Well, I have a theory, and it's this. It takes saying the word impossible just enough times before something amazing and something absolutely sane becomes possible, before it finally happens. So towards all the amazing things that are about to go right for the world, that need to happen for the sake of our kids, for our city, for all of the families everywhere, and for the very destiny of the earth, please repeat after me one last time. Oh no, that's impossible. All right, so you've said it one last time. I don't want to hear it again. So awesome. Okay, so here, speaking of impossible, let me tell you a little something about yourselves that's considered impossible, and you never hear from the corporate media. Portland, Oregon, that was totally like other American cities across the country. Our inner city was dying back in the 60s and 70s. Storefronts were closing. Sprawl was epidemic. It seemed as if we were just going to go like everyone else, and the whole idea was like, no, we need to grow. Guess what? We built a public square the mayor said, that's impossible. I can't let that happen because that would facilitate a revolution. Have you ever seen the pictures of Portlanders coming out on a weekend to paint the rooftop of the two-story parking garage that Myron Frank used to have where Pioneer Square is now? We came out, we painted the rooftop, and we said, space into place. This will be the first community gathering place in the history of this city where time and space is not for sale. This thing catalyzed a revolution across the spectrum, the political spectrum and the cultural spectrum of our region. You know what's happened in the decades since that happened? This. Portland, Oregon is now known as the most sustainable city in the United States, and I'm not saying we're perfect, but we have the most green buildings of all cities. We're first in declining car use per capita. We are driving fewer miles every year. We have the most bike commuters and the most bike lane miles by far. We have the nation's strongest local food systems, which mean that food comes from a shorter distance from where it's grown to where we eat it in the country. We are the first city to adopt a formal plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and believe it or not, Portland, Oregon has already met the Kyoto Accord targets. Portland is one of the first cities to have campaign finance reform and publicly owned elections. We have the first streetcar system built in the USA in the last 50 years. We have the strongest and most active neighborhood association in all the nation. By 2.5 times, we have the most hybrid cars of all cities. We are the first to mandate biodiesel content in all diesel sold in the city. We have one of the strongest historic preservation cultures in the country. We have the densest urban forest canopy, which means we have the most trees per capita. Where have you heard these things? We have the most community and nonprofits. We have the most cafes and restaurants, small businesses. It goes on and on and on. I mean, there's just literally pages of this stuff. I find it interesting that people have actually surveyed us and said that we have the most polite drivers in the country. Like, that's because people are actually taking ownership of their place and feeling more connected to other people. We also have the most and best microbreweries in the entire country. But this is my favorite statistic. We have the greatest, biggest naked bike ride in the world. Do you know how this went? It was like London had set the record at 700. Portland was like, oh no, can we beat that? That night, 13,000 naked booties were out there in the street. This is about community building and public space reclamation for sure. And then Minneapolis was like, oh yeah? And they started to get out in the street to get naked too. And then London came back at us. And then we went 6,500 the next time. And then the next time we went more than 13,000 this year. Getting naked in the streets is a tradition in Portland, Oregon. Did you hear this from the Oregonian? We set the national record for the most people to vote against a sitting president in 2004, when almost 90% voted against George Bush. Yes, we are awesome. We are not perfect. We have so many problems, but we're getting it together. Okay, so this is what I want to say. For sanity to prevail, this is what I think needs to happen. Like we do in Portland, people can look around them and realize that it's been a long time that we have been trying to make sense of this world. People can look around and realize that our world is, it's like we're working in reverse. It's like we're driving a car backwards towards a cliff. Somehow too often, the majority have not been winning, but a few people with scant integrity have managed to usurp the destiny of our people, our culture, to their own narrow, wholly unsustainable benefit. In Portland, many of us have stopped waiting for some authority to give us permission to make this world a better place. Because we know this is our place. Wherever we live, wherever you live, it is your place. There are all manner of challenges to be met in your own community. To be met, to bring people together that you live among, bring them together and meet them and then grow stronger. Then meet the first challenge together and grow stronger still. And then the next. Turn adversity into opportunity. At each scale of growth, become stronger, more informed, and don't just focus on problems. Make the world where you live into a reflection of the highest, best ideas in your community, and don't wait for permission. It is your birthright to do these kinds of things. If there are no gathering places where you live, how can people gather? And again, what good is freedom of assembly without a place to assemble? If we are running out of oil and out of time, get involved. You can do anything. Do anything. Anything that is a catalyst for more to happen. Beauty, love, food, bring people together. When people are actually sitting face to face across from each other and they look in each other's eyes, they can start to actually understand each other, cross lines and figure stuff out. That is how we will make the world more sane. So let's get beyond the issues that polarize us by saying hello and mean it. Help other people with what they care about. Don't just ask them to help you with what you want to do. Do what needs to be done to repair the world. One last thing, like we say in Portland, this is our place. And in the same way that this is our home, let's make our world a better place. Let's restore us some sanity in the USA.